Okay, so starting with our demo here, we'll probably do two videos for the demo. We'll do our perfect world and our real world demonstration, but then we'll take it out, sort of reach back to one of the previous um, demos in one of the earlier modules and do a spatial join between what we geocode and attach it to some Maryland counties, so we can kind of sort of come full circle on some of the stuff that we had done before and what we're doing now with geocoding. So here in our catalog, I just want to show you guys really quick. I've got it organized into folders within my geocoding demo folder. I've got 4 folders: the address locator. In a perfect world, I'd mentioned the hunkydory.dbf because in a perfect world, everything is just hunky-dory, everything's just great. I've got a real world example here, a client database that I picked up several years ago. It's about 125 records, and I've got some other information that I've kind of taken out of it and some other stuff that I've put in sort of for demonstration purposes. So we'll see how this DBF geocodes against our reference data. And in this case, my reference data is going to be MD roads, and you'll see that in our map here in just a few minutes. And I also have an MD Counties shapefile, one similar to the ones that we used in previous modules, to do a little bit more and sort of extend what we're doing here within the context of the demo. So getting back up here to the address locator, I'd mentioned that I have one called MD Roads. So this address locator here is a file that I created in our catalog some time ago that references this road layer here. So this is basically where I'm getting my address information for all the different road sections in Maryland, and that's why I'm calling it MD Roads. If I come back up to the address locator and I just go and double click and open it, I'm going to see an interface here that is going to give me a bunch of information about first the reference data on the left, and then of course the address table that or where in the address table it should be looking for a particular street or a particular zone. In this case, the zone is going to be the zip code. The street is going to be contained within a field called address 1. I'm telling this address locator that the data that I'm going to be geocoding, these are the 2 fields that they need to be looking in, or that it needs to be looking in to get its address information. As far as the reference data goes, you can see my location here. I'd mentioned that mdroads.shape is my reference data, and so it needs to know where the address ranges are on the left and on the right side of the road, the from and the to for both the left and the right. So again, imagining how addresses are arranged in the real world. Walking down the street, you have addresses on the left, addresses on the right. You have a range from one number to another, so that's going to be possibly 100 to 198. And then on the other side of the road, you might have 101 to 199. So that would be the 100 block, for example, of a particular street. And then, of course, we've got all of our prefixes and our suffixes that we may have with the names of our streets. If we have North Charles Street or South Baltimore Street or something like that, you would indicate that within these particular fields. So this is basically the information that ArcGIS needs to know to be able to do geocoding. These are the fields within this particular shapefile where that information is stored. And so again, this locator file is sort of a definition or a connection between where it should be looking in both the address table and in the reference data. And then I'd mentioned all the tolerances and other settings we can put into our data, the different spelling sensitivities. We're just going to take the default here, but we do have information for candidates, minimum scoring. And so basically what happens is ArcGIS scores every match that it makes for every individual address, and so you have thresholds that you can set to say if it doesn't match something exactly, meaning that it would be up at 100%, then you don't want it to match, and then you have to deal with it individually, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the demo. Some things might be misspelled, so you can dial that back a little bit. If something is misspelled by maybe one character, it may actually geocode it, but you may choose to dial it up a little bit higher and make sure that it is an exact match for spelling. That is going to sort of reduce the number of matches that you wind up getting. For intersections, you may not have address data. You may have something like Main Street at Cross Street or Main Street at High Street, and so you can geocode to intersections as well, and you would just indicate what would be the particular connectors, if you will, for those types of connections for intersections. You can specify your side offset and your end offset. Your side offset would be how many feet or meters or units in general that you want your geocoded points to come off of your roads. By default, the setting is 0, so it'll place your point right along the road section. And then your end offset is a percentage of the end or a percentage back from the end of a segment that either ends or maybe makes a T with another line segment, and so you don't want to accidentally put a geocoded point that looks like it's on one road when it's actually on another one that makes sort of a T with it, so you actually give it a percentage of the total length of the line that it would back it off. And so that's one of the things we might look at in the demo here. If candidates tie, you may have a situation where you have an address in your table and you have two different possible locations that it could be, so it might actually assign it to a tied candidate, and then you have to decide which location the point is actually supposed to go, and you can do that interactively. When it goes through the geocoding process, it actually creates a shapefile. And so some of the additional layers that you can, or fields that you can add are indicated down here. I've got X and Y coordinates, so in this case my data happens to be in nat 83 meters, so it's going to add an X and a Y coordinate, and it's going to give me those coordinates in nat 83 meters in that coordinate system. So again, just looking at the properties here of the address locator, but you're actually going to be creating one and also working with one within the exercises as well. So just looking at the one that we're using for the demo here today. So I'm just going to go ahead and say OK there. And I'm just going to go ahead and do the perfect world hunky-dory geocode here, so we can see that I'm going to geocode this table. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump out of our catalog and I'm going to refresh this so that our catalog and ArcMap don't go fighting over this data. And I'm going to go ahead and open up ArcMap here, and you can see that I have the state of Maryland and a bunch of counties, the 23 counties in Baltimore City, and that's just to kind of give us some context. But if I turn on the Maryland roads layer, you can see that's a very large file. It takes a few seconds for it to load up. I'm just going to zoom in here a little tighter, and you can see all the different roads that make up the general area. So I'm just going to click on any one of these particular sections, probably in a residential area here, and you can see that particular segment that I clicked on. You can see the from, to, and left, right side of the road, left side of the road, all the prefix information, the name of the street, the suffix, whether it's a road, a court, an avenue, etc., and then what the zip code is on the right and on the left side of the road. So this is all the geocoding information that the reference data has to have to be able to geocode point locations from a table using a reference layer from using a reference layer that is a set of roads. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add data, and I'm going to add my hunky-dory DBF again, which is in a perfect world, everything's just hunky-dory. So what that basically means is that I know that this address table, these 10 addresses, are actually going to code properly. So I know that these addresses are going to match records within this address table in here. So one of the things you can do is just right-click on the table and go to Geocode Addresses, and you can start the process there. But I do want to indicate that you can come up here to the gray area and right-click, and you can wait patiently for ArcGIS to bring up this list of other tools that are available to you. That's taking a little longer than I would really like for a demonstration. This is also available under the Customize menu over here, but it would probably take just as long. But you can see we have the geocoding tool that's going to load up here. So I'm just going to go ahead and dock this for now and put this over here. We'll talk about that here in just a second. But again, you could just as easily come over here and say geocode addresses, which is going to do the same thing as clicking on the little mailbox over here. Now I did want to point out, we mentioned in the overview that there are ArcGIS online resources. So these are the different locators that ArcGIS makes available to you. You could actually punch in an address as well. So I'm just going to punch in the college address here for the Essex campus. So I'm going to say Rossville Boulevard, 21237, and just very quickly it'll flash that up. So it just took that address that I put in and checked it against this US Streets geocoding service that Esri makes available, and again just flashes that up on screen. So you can see how that quickly references that data. So I'm going to go ahead and click on geocode addresses here, and I'm going to choose either the ones that ArcGIS makes available to me, or in this case I'm going to use the one that is in my address locator, which again references this particular shapefile that has all the road information for Maryland. So I'm going to go ahead and add that, and I'm going to say OK. And another interface is going to come up here, and it knows that I want to geocode hunkydory.dbf, and because my address locator says that I should be looking for the address information in the address _1 field, it automatically pulls that up, and for the zone it's looking for the zip field, so the area which the point should geocode to. I encourage you guys to not take the default here in terms of the location. You want to put this in a place where you want it to go. In this case, I'm going to put it in my demos folder. When you're going through your exercises, you want to geocode to the appropriate location. You want to geocode to the appropriate location for your assignment number 6 as well, which preferably would be your assignment 6 folder on your local hard drive. So in this case, I'm just going to take my geocoding result, and I don't want to do a personal or file geodatabase. I'm just going to write this out to a shapefile, and I'm going to let it geocode directly into this folder right here. So it's not going into any of these folders. I'm going to create a new shapefile, and these are employees where I used to work, so I'll just call these employees.shape, and I'll say save, and I'll say OK, and it's going to run through that process. And it ran through it very quickly. You can see I've only got 10 records, so it didn't take very long for it to match this table against this set of roads. So when I go ahead and say close here, you're going to see here, I'm going to just change this so you can see it a little bit easier, a little more easily. Those green dots now represent the 10 people that I just geocoded addresses for. So for example, if I zoom in here a little bit tighter and I come into the one that I labeled as myself, I do not live on Greenmount Avenue, but that's the one that is associated with me. So that was the 3300 block of Greenmount Avenue. We don't have addresses on the right. We only have addresses on the left. So there's the range of 3301 to 3333. Greenmount Avenue 21218. If we look at the address where it geocoded, that was Jamie, 3309 Greenmount Avenue, Baltimore, Maryland 21218. So we basically have a point location for all of those records that we just geocoded. So again, 100% match, and in fact when we open up that table we can see that ArcGIS gives it a score. You can see that one of them didn't score exactly 100%, and so we can look at that example and we can see here, well, in my address I said 702 Lake Avenue. When we come over here, what it matched it against, there's a 702 West Lake Avenue. So there isn't a 100% sure confidence on the part of ArcGIS that it nailed it, so it scores it a little bit lower. But then there's the other ones that are scored as 100 that it absolutely is positively sure that it placed correctly. So you can investigate the ones that score a little bit less. And again, those settings in the address locator, the minimum score in this case is set to 10. So if it's got a score of 10 or higher, it's going to place a location for it. So let's get rid of hunkydory.dbf because that's the perfect world. I want to talk about the real world here, and I'm going to go ahead and add in, instead of the perfect world, I'm going to add in the real world. So working clients. So we've got another table here. I'm going to open that up and we can see a bunch of addresses, and right off the bat we can see, well, we've got no city information. Well, we've only got it for some cities and not all of them. So that's another one of those issues, if you will, that you know, we could have 123 Main Street in Cumberland, and we can have 123 Main Street in Salisbury, for example. So it would really help to have city information, but the zip code information definitely is going to help that process as well. But again, just the completeness of your address information is really key to your geocoding process. You see here that I have a spent column. I'm just going to go ahead and sort that. This happens to be the number of times individual customers came in and how much they spent each time. Again, this is theoretical, but these are just numbers that I added in there. You can see our big spenders towards the bottom of the list, and then of course our maybe we've only come in a couple of times and just spent a few bucks. Again, just using some context here as a business geocoding its addresses. So I'm going to go ahead and I don't have to turn on Maryland roads to see that. They do take a bit to load, so I'm going to go ahead and let them stay turned off. So I'm going to go ahead and geocode these addresses. And again, I've got a couple of different options. I can choose the ArcGIS Online. I can choose my own. So I'm going to go ahead and just use my own for now. And notice that it says none for street or intersection because this address locator is set to look for a field called address_1. In this particular table, working clients, the address field is address underscore. So there's a difference there, so you have to just let it know. You have to guide it and tell it. So I'm going to call this one clients. And I'm going to say save. And I'm going to let that geocode. And I can see that 92 out of the 125, 126 that I have geocoded. So again, there's a problem here with 32 of the records, and so I can go into this rematch window here, and I can look at the unmatched addresses and see what the problem is with those addresses. Now I'm not going to go through this process in the demo simply because you're going to actually practice that in the exercises in chapter 17, but this is where you would go through and say, oh, I can see what the problem is with this particular address. It's not 2387, maybe it's or 23876, maybe it's just 2387. Maybe you transposed a number, and then you could actually search for that and try to find it, and then you would say this is where I would want to match the location, and a potential candidate would show up here in this window. You would click on it and then you would match it. You can also pick an address from the map. So if you know for a fact that an address resides in a particular place, you can click on that and interact with the map and say this is where this particular point goes. You can pick that address from the map directly. So you can see here that my clients all geocoded. I did have one in Florida that did not geocode, so I'm going to go ahead and sort this by unmatched, and I'll go down to one of the ones that I'm going to look for FL, and so there's an address for one of my clients that was actually in Florida. It was not able to match it, so when I zoom to the extent of this data, that Florida point will not be way down there. If I geocoded to, say, one of the ArcGIS Online address locators, then it would have actually found that. But because my address locator was only for Maryland roads, according to this reference data, it was not able to find that client that was down in Florida. In this case, we're looking at clients that are just in Maryland. So a couple of different ways we can do it. I'm going to show you one or two other things in the other demo video, and then I'll show you how to spatially join these points to the polygons, which will bring us sort of full circle with some of our earlier modules.